The Ed Transformed Talks is a series of podcasts brought to you by School of the Future International Academy, also known as SOFIA. We are a non-governmental, non-profit organization which supports school leaders, educators, and educational organizations in their effort to evolve and improve their operations. Through our podcasts, we share experts' opinions on issues that concern the educational community. This is Natassa Nika from the SOFIA, and today I will have a talk with Dr. Constantinos Dino Kiritsis on how educators can maintain employable in 2021. Hello, Dino.
Hello, how are you?
We're very well. Thank you for joining us. A few words about Dino before we begin our discussion. Dr. Constantinos Dino Kiritsis is an award-winning business professional operating as an entrepreneur and consultant in business, HR, training and development industry. He is considered a world-class inspirational trainer and presenter, having trained and led diverse events for numerous corporations and associations. He has delivered close to 20,000 hours of professional training, hosting and presentations in the last 20 years in more than 40 countries in Europe, Asia and the Middle East, mainly to corporate clients. He is the founder of StudySmart, a company offering consulting, professional qualifications, training mainly for corporate clients. He is also a consultant and international curriculum development expert for PwC's Academy in the Central East Europe and the Middle East. It is clear that we couldn't have a better person to speak to us about today's topic. So, Dino.
Thank you very much for the intro. Wow.
Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your opinion on the topic. Let's start from the basics. So what is employability? Let's define the term.
Employability is actually something quite simple. And I just mention it or talk about it as being job ready. People have to be job ready. And when I mean job ready, we don't mean only hard skills. We mean soft skills. I think employability is a lot more about soft skills, being able to blend into the culture of an organization, being able to work with others, being able to communicate, being able to know what's required from you, to have empathy, to have various skills that relate to building a very good profile for yourself, and of course being able to at any point in time take on any task or project. So we all have to remain employable, be job ready, as I say, in a hard and soft sense. And it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a real, I would say, important reassessment and self-assessment of oneself on a daily basis, because we're going too fast.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very interesting. When you say job ready, how can educators, let's focus on educators, how can they prove that they're job ready?
Well, there's a lot of things I can say on that topic. And as any professional in the world, we all have to update our knowledge. And one thing that I've been talking a lot about and writing about is the requirement of continuing professional development. And I'm sure you understand that. The point is that every professional needs to update their knowledge. I think we should feel that as if we are applications. People are applications. And the same way we update our app, we have to update ourselves. I have a feeling that educational degrees, academic ones basically, should have an expiry date in some disciplines. It's impossible to go and do a technology degree or an engineering degree and be, and use the same, let's say, things that you were learned 15, 20 years ago. And of course, people don't do that, of course, because in the work environment, they do update. But at some point, we have to do that self-assessment and say, what else do I need now? What has changed? How should I develop my career and stay employable? So being job ready and being, let's say, competent at all points in times requires what I call CPD, continuing professional development. And that's why I'm sure you're aware of or associations and organizations that always require units, credits to be done in order to continue to be employable and have that qualification. I'll give you an example of ACCA, which is an accounting profession, not the education in education, of course, but the accountants, when they complete their accountancy qualification, they need to submit back to the association a series of credits, or 20 or 40 credits depending on the time. And that makes them update their qualification to use it on their business card, on their LinkedIn page. And of course, they can do at random checks to make sure that the quality of what they do does give them that added value that they are employable. So basically, CPD is required by everyone. And I have a feeling, and we can talk more about this if you want. I mean, we can elaborate that educators were not really into this. And the reason educators were not because the governments in the public sector schools didn't require up-to-dateness. Even private schools in many cases didn't require someone to be up to date. You're hired because of your CV. The question is, can someone teach? It's one thing what you say on paper. I mean, I've been hired on my CV, but I'm asking myself, they never saw me teach. What did they hire? It's a lot of things we can talk about here, and I think the system needs to be mended in some way. So to come back to your question, I don't want to, I sometimes take time but I will. I'm coming back to your question. It has to do with being up to date. You have to spend 20 to 40 hours, I think, on updating in areas that everyone thinks that they should. Now, if I may, Natassa, please, do I have more time on this? Can I?
Of course. You have as much time as you need.
Okay, it's really important to sit back and assess yourself. So we also have another classic thing that we do, which I think should also be reassessed. We look at our weaknesses sometimes. People don't focus on their strengths. For some reason, when you do a SWOT analysis of yourself, you say, okay, I'm very good at this, or I think I'm capable in that, but I'm not very good in this, I'm weak, whatever, but we don't really try to do more on our strengths and build more our strengths. We focus sometimes too much on our weaknesses. We're trying to mend things that we're not really good at. Now, what am I saying? That yes, you have to fix your weaknesses and build your strengths, but there should be a good balance. So when people start to update themselves, educators especially, they need to know what they're weak in, but also build their strong points, because that's what they're known for. So there should be a good balance there, not focus in one area only.
That is extremely interesting. And you're absolutely right that we all tend to try to fill our CVs with things we didn't know beforehand, and we neglect evolving and developing the things we already feel we know well.
Yeah.
That leads me to the next question. Do you think that after the pandemic, after what happened with the school closures and everything, that all the difficulties that this caused, do you think the attitude and the rationale of the teachers has changed? Do you see a shift?
Yes, I think there is a shift, and I think my view on this is that I think we made a big mistake as well as education organizations sometimes, especially in the beginning, to focus more on the technology. And I realize how important technology is. For example, having, let's say, Microsoft Teams to use for a school or any type of platform, any company's using. But I think we focus too much on the technology, and we didn't focus too much on the training and the education part. So I think that was a mistake, because we understood that the technology doesn't save the day. The technology is a tool. It's not the solution. The technology is part of a strategy, and you need the technology. There's no doubt about it. What we're doing right now, we're doing this podcast. I was teaching a few hours ago. We're using the technology, but that doesn't mean the technology takes on its own. You got to be a good educator. You have to understand what motivates people. So I think we focus too much on the tech and not really on the educational skills, which are now, Natassa, listen to this, I think this is a good point, are becoming more paramount, because the problem is, how do we motivate people at home? How do we lead people at home? How do we talk about empathy at home? It's a whole new dimension of, I call it social tech. You got to be social through the technology now. And I think educators need a new skill set to understand what the student is going through at home, which we never were taught. Everyone has a degree, in education or whatever, everyone is doing, but they never really had this. So it's a totally new thing. We haven't dealt with it again. We are making mistakes, but it's never too late to mend them. And I think if we pinpoint the areas, which are still the education, it's still about the educator, it's still about, let's say, the skills, about the inspiration, about the creativity. Yes, using the technology, so now we can do more. Got that? That's important. But we have to have that balance. So I'm not sure if I'm clear, but I think that's very important to state.
To focus. That's right. Realistically speaking, though, is it reasonable to ask from teachers to study all the time, on top of all the workload they have during the school year? How can they develop their skills without having to sit down and devote hours and hours and hours on acquiring qualifications?
Yeah, but okay, they don't need to get a qualification necessarily. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's all about doing some extra work to update oneself on what's going on a new methodology. What kind of new tool is out there that can help you, do better breakout rooms with your students in the tech area, or how to motivate remote learners. They have to pinpoint that. And one good thing about continuing development is that no one forces us to do that. We do it on our own. Mm-hmm. At school, or when I was in college, you had to follow what the professor tells you or what the educator tells you. But now I do what I really like. And I think educators, to be in education, you must love what you do. I still think it's one of the best occupations in the world, because you deal with children, with young students, or even at my level, I also do training to professionals. But it's always about meeting people, sharing experiences, being around, and having fun. I mean, I don't see that as being a problem. I think that's a great thing to do. But overall, to come back to your question, the point is that we like to do things on our own, and it doesn't take more than a few hours, every couple of weeks to look at something, to read an article, to subscribe to the key, I would say, associations, organizations for online learning, for building soft skill competencies. I mean, there's so many things out there, and I know, you know what the problem is? Having said that, the problem is that we have too many of these, and you don't know where to focus. Mm-hmm. And yes, okay, that's a good question. Just mentioning it now, but I think if we just update, sometimes I subscribe to a series of organizations, and they sent me some information. It doesn't mean that I read everything. It's impossible in this day and age to read everything. So what do? We read the headline. If it's something that really captures, my attention, I say, okay, I got to look at this. So I save it for some. I mean, even that is part of updating. CPD. So yeah, and it doesn't have to be a qualification. It doesn't have to be a seminar. Go to a conference. And by the way, we have virtual conferences now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can go, we can be there, we can record it and see it whenever we can. But we have to be disciplined in this. Do it every once in a while. It's the same thing. It's like going to the gym. You're not going to lose weight in one day if you read a lot in one day or do a lot of work in one day. You got to go every day for just 15 minutes, and that's how you lose the weight. So it takes momentum, and that's what I'm trying to say to every educator: be inspired, love what you do, and of course, just spend a little bit of time, 15 minutes, that's interesting. Let me look more into this and save it on a file and then go back to it. Even that can help you update.
That is very interesting what you're saying. And you're taking it from the perspective of the educator. I want to take you now on the same topic. I want you to tell us, what is the responsibility of the school leader in enforcing this kind of attitude and philosophy in his school?
Well, I think, every school leader wants their people, their educators, to be up to date. Okay. And if you're talking to a private school, if we talk about private schools, it's even, I would say, a lot more important because, people pay, parents pay for the education, and they want they want the best. Now, in any setting, however, every educator, every school leader needs to find a way not to enforce. I mean, I think, Natassa, you used a very harsh word, even though I totally understand why you're saying it, because sometimes we have to enforce these things because everything has an expiry date in one sense. But if you think about it, if they create a mindset of these things, and maybe the school leader can create, I would say, an infrastructure. an infrastructure to say that, we're doing this. I know a great school that gets everyone together, or especially even before the pandemic, to talk about innovation. Right. So, every 2 weeks there's educators that present an idea. People listen, the open doors, people going to a different classroom, something that, we talk about these things through Sophia, and my role as a board member, the School of the Future International Academy. We try to talk about ways where a school can create that mindset without being enforceable. So how do you do that? You create these activities throughout where people would love to participate, to learn, to share, and to kind of share the information even on a cloud or even face to face when the time comes. So that's, I think, the role of the school, because there is no law that people need to be educated. There is a code of ethics that we need to be educated, which in my case, I treat as a law, to be honest, with myself, to speak the way I speak. It's like I'm regulated for this, but I think everyone can get that mindset, and the school leader should create that mindset, or should help. Now, if you talk about a public school, it's all about the government, and the government can, quote unquote, enforce something like that, just to make sure that people are following, the best practices. We're living in a so dynamic age that things are changing on a weekly or daily basis, that you got to follow what's going on. And I know it's becoming even more difficult, but if you are disciplined in that sense, and the infrastructure helps you, and you do have a different way of seeing things, I think it can happen.
Mm-hmm. You spoke earlier about soft skills that educators should develop. Could you give us some, if you had to prioritize on what are the most significant soft skills that educators should have nowadays, what would they be?
Wow, lots to tell you on this one now. And I have to start with my favorite skill. And the favorite skill, if you agree with me, is communication. Mm-hmm. I think it's the beginning of everything in terms of employability, in terms of the educator. The educators communicate. So can you imagine an educator not being able to communicate? Think about that. It's a disaster. It's a tragedy. So people have to know how to communicate. And why am I stressing this point? Because there's a lot of people that are educators that do not communicate well. And it goes back to my example, if I remember well, of the CV thing. They hire people on CVs. They should hire people because they do a sample. It's like getting an acting role. You have an actor or an actress. They gotta go and do the casting, right? Mm-hmm. But we don't do that as educators. So of course, if something goes wrong, you get the feedback. But some people have no feedback, and in some countries, feedback is not allowed. So come on, there's a big issue here. So coming back to this point, communication. We have to learn how to not only communicate verbally, how to inspire, how to really make something interesting, and then how to communicate back to the students in terms of writing an email to your group. How that should be inspirational as well. And some people don't have that. Some people are good verbally. They're not really good in writing. They're probably good in making an attachment, but not very good in an email. They're not really good at handling a camera. They're not really good in understanding and sensing the body language. This is all communication. That should be a huge topic for educators. And I have a feeling that it's not. If you go back to, and we're going to have another podcast on this, but that's the huge topic and the number one soft skill. And that builds empathy, which brings me to I have to link that with communication. And empathy is not sympathy. There's a lot of good books on this and great videos if you want to have a look on it. And those of us who are listening in, empathy is really putting yourself in the shoes of others. So as an educator, when I'm doing this podcast now and we're talking, I'm thinking about you, basically. I want you to do a good job. So I'm trying to think, how will this be recorded? How will this be, you got to think in the shoes and being in the shoes of the other person. Now, if you're talking about children, this is paramount. Think of, I have 2 children myself. So I want the educators that teach my children to think of them at home. Think of the fact that why they're not using their camera when they don't want to. Think of how to motivate them more. So, and of course, think of what they're going through. So the second, I think, skill, which is linked with the first one, because empathy is part of communication. Another related one would be listening. Don't get me wrong. I know people that don't even listen, so that's another good point. The other two or three topics that come to mind, I would say, would be problem solving. And the reason I'm actually becoming more interested in problem solving, I actually do some trainings on the topic, is because the World Economic Forum, the recent study in 2020 and 2021, there was a new one published also with in association with PwC, and that's why I remember reading it recently. Problem solving, making decisions, effective decision making, taking initiative, creative thinking. These were the skills of 2025. There's a whole list. People can read it. And I was amazed of how important the softer parts were. I think of the top 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 were all soft skills. And, one of them was problem solving. And why? Because I think we're actually here to solve problems that have not been invented yet. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Even the pandemic is a good example. So problem solving is another great skill of educators. Leadership, of course, for obvious reasons. And now we have to think about leading remotely, communicating remotely. You add one word and you have a whole topic now. And don't tell me there's experts on this. Mm-hmm. There are no experts in this. I mean, we're actually doing this now, and I'm creating curriculums for this, and I'm actually called on doing a webinar on this topic as we speak in April, because I want to structure it the way I'm trying to solve it. But I'm doing it because I have the experience in doing it, but no one taught it to me. So there's a lot of big problems here in that area of leading people remotely. And a couple of more, if I can, I would say, being innovative, having creative thinking. I've coined a word. I'm not sure if you remember this, Natassa. We spoke a couple of years back about trainerpreneurship, mm-hmm. which is I wrote in my book. And, it's taking, being an entrepreneur in class. Mm-hmm. And, what's the best time to do that apart from, the pandemic period? This is the great time to become trainerpreneurs. You're educators. We have to educate and take some risks and find new ways of making things interesting for the children, above all.
Mm-hmm. In this context, what role do you think mentors have in schools now?
Huge. It goes without saying. And I think also coming back to that, the mentors at school also need to be educated, because it's not something that you're born with. Oh, become a mentor or, become a coach. Don't get me wrong. So, being a mentor takes some skills, and mentor is not coach, and some people, could confuse that. I'm not going to go into the academic setting here. There are some overlaps, but there's a different, of course, perspective of seeing things. And mentors can really support. It's like having student advisors like we do at universities and in schools, many countries, because I know we have an international let's say audience mm-hmm. for this podcast. So it's not, going to America or some Asian school having a school, let's say, advisor. Mentors can act as the people who really support and people can open up to. And I have a feeling that the more we embed this mentorship activity in schools, the better outcomes it will have for the well-being of our children. And I think they would be more open to really go with what they really want to do in the future. So I think you really mentioned something that I think probably need a whole topic as well from an expert in mentoring, and not myself, but I really understand and appreciate their role. And I think they should act as part of the whole curriculum of a student, the whole portfolio, to support and really, with guidance. I think that's the key word from mentors to go forward. So
great. Closing today's podcast, what would be your 3 key pieces of advice that you would give to educators on the topic of employability today?
Okay. Let me think about, I have a couple in mind. So the first one would be to know a quote that I usually say in my presentations, which says, degrees can get you in any organization, any institution, any school, but competencies make us stay. So if you have the chance to be evaluated and feedbacked for your work, it's the competencies that people look at, not the degree. The degree is good for the starting point of anyone's career. So remember that quote. Degrees get us in, but competencies make us stay. So focus on competency development. Number two, one of our roles as educators, and it should be in the code of ethics of every educator around the world. We're actually making an education certificate, Natassa. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, concerning, about how educators, what should they know to update their knowledge and what to do as a seal of approval of being up to date. So we're doing that. And in the code of ethics, there is an area of inspiration. We have to inspire children. If you're an educator that doesn't inspire, it's not really effective. I cannot see an educator being effective when they cannot inspire the people that they talk to. So inspiration would be something that I would focus on if you can. Of course, you have to love what you do. And finally, I think, using another, let's say, thing that we just talked about today, I would say continuing professional development. That's my third, I would say, piece of advice. To continue to always be disciplined and do things, find your own ritual, do something specific every certain point in time when you can to update yourself. It's always useful. You don't need to go through, a whole article. You can see bits and pieces. We're living in a fast moving world. And then when you see something that really captures attention, go and do a deep dive. There's not everything is good, not everything is reliable, and not everything is valid. We have a lot of fake news and fake information, but I'm sure we all know what's a reliable source. And I think if you just update yourself, you'll always be able to handle a conversation, be close to your children. The children are very fast in getting all this, these updates. So it's always important to speak their language. And that's why, we do what we do. So to summarize, competencies make us stay, number one. Number two, be inspirational. That's the job. That should be in every educator's vision. And of course, number three, update. A final point would be, this is the best time to start writing and trying things because no one has the answers. We're going through a pandemic, which will stay with us for a few years, of course, in different ways and better ways, hopefully. But it's a great time to start to try things because no one has the answer. So the answer is up to us. Let's try things. Let's do things. And that's, I think that's one of my, important points to finalize with.
If you allow me to add on your second point, the one about inspiration, I think that it is very, very, I couldn't agree more with you, but I think it's very important to be inspirational towards your peers as well, to try actively and inspire your coworkers, the teacher in the next classroom, so that you show that you're supportive, show that you have ideas and that you are willing on taking other people on your journey to develop. Because I think as educators, we need to act as a community rather than as individuals who do things on our own in our rooms.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much for talking to us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we hope to have you here again soon on another topic.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All the best.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.